The illusion of the self. How science is proving it. What if that you've known your entire life, that constant, familiar voice in your head, the one reading these very words, is just a story? A clever trick your brain is playing on itself? This isn't just late-night philosophical speculation anymore. It's a conclusion being seriously explored by some of the most startling discoveries in modern neuroscience. We all have this feeling, right? A sense of a solid, continuous self. An I that was here yesterday and will be here tomorrow. We feel like there's a CEO sitting in a corner office in our skull, experiencing our life and calling the shots. But what if that CEO is a phantom? What if you're not the fixed, unchanging person you feel like you are? We're about to look at some mind-bending neuroscience experiments that suggest your identity is a carefully constructed illusion. The kind of research that might make you question who, or what, you really are. By the end of this, the person you think you are right now might just feel like a distant memory. Section 1. The philosophical cracks. Before we get into the lab coats and brain scans, it's worth remembering that this unsettling idea isn't new. For centuries, philosophers and spiritual traditions have been pointing out the cracks in the very foundation of the self. In Buddhist philosophy, for instance, a core concept is anatta, which roughly translates to no self. The idea here is that our feeling of being a permanent, separate self is actually the root of our problems. We're clinging to something that was never really there. The self in this view is more like a process than a thing, like a wave in the ocean. You can point to it and describe it, but it has no fixed existence. It's just a temporary pattern, a fleeting shape the water takes. Over in the West, the philosopher David Hume argued that if you actually try to look inward to find this self, you always come up empty. You can't find the thinker, you only find a stream of thoughts. You can't find the feeler, just a river of feelings. There's no single core entity in there, just the experience itself. For a long time, these were compelling thought experiments, but they perfectly set the stage for a scientific revolution that would take these abstract ideas and put them to the test by literally splitting a mind in two. Section 2. The divided brain. And this is where the story gets really weird. In the mid-20th century, surgeons developed a wild procedure for patients with severe epilepsy. To stop seizures from storming across the brain, they would sever the main bridge connecting the two hemispheres, the corpus callosum. The surgery worked wonders for the seizures, but it left these split-brain patients with, in a very real sense, two separate conscious minds in one body. The experiments they took part in are now legendary. Here's the setup. Your left brain hemisphere usually controls the right side of your body and handles language. It's your talker. Your right hemisphere controls your left side and is more of a visual, spatial artist. In a typical brain, they're in constant contact, creating one smooth, unified experience. But when that connection is cut, you can talk to each hemisphere separately. In a classic experiment, a patient is shown a picture of a snow scene, but only to their right hemisphere. At the same time, a picture of a chicken claw is shown only to their left hemisphere. They're then asked to point to related pictures. The patient's left hand, steered by the right hemisphere that saw the snow, correctly points to a shovel. Their right hand, steered by the left hemisphere that saw the chicken claw, correctly points to a chicken. So far, so good. Each half is acting on what it saw. But here's the kicker. When the researcher asks the patient why, they pointed to the shovel. Only the left hemisphere, the talker, can answer. And it has no clue why the left hand chose a shovel. It never saw the snow. Does it say, "I don't know"? Nope. It instantly makes up a story. The patient might confidently say, "Oh, that's simple. The chicken claw goes with the chicken and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken coop." Think about what that means. The left hemisphere concocted a plausible, but completely false reason for an action it didn't initiate. Neuroscientists call this the left brain interpreter. It's a storyteller, a spin doctor, whose job is to create a coherent narrative from the chaos of information, even if it has to invent one. These studies suggest that our feeling of being a single, rational person making choices might just be this interpreter, writing a story of unity after the fact. The I isn't the CEO in charge. It's more like the press secretary, confidently explaining decisions it had no part in making. Section 3. The self-generating story. So if the self is a story, where's the storyteller? Recently, neuroscientists have zeroed in on a prime suspect, a network of brain regions called the default mode network, or DMN. The DMN is what kicks into gear when you're not focused on the outside world. It's the network that lights up when you're daydreaming, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, or wondering what your friends think of you. In other words, it's buzzing whenever you're thinking about yourself. This network is the home of our inner monologue, that constant chatter that forms the soundtrack to our lives. It appears to be the neural architecture of our personal narrative. But here's the most fascinating part. What happens when the DMN goes quiet? Think about a time you were completely lost in an activity, that flow state psychologists talk about. Maybe you were playing an instrument, lost in a creative project, or deep in a sport. In those moments, your sense of self just melts away. The inner chatter goes silent. There's no you doing the thing. There's only the doing itself. And what do brain scans show during these flow states? The default mode network has quieted way down. The same thing happens during deep meditation, and even more profoundly, under the influence of psychedelic compounds like psilocybin. These can cause a massive drop in DMN activity, leading to what's often called ego dissolution, the feeling that the boundary between you and the universe has completely dissolved. The self isn't just quiet. For a moment, it's gone. These states offer powerful clues that our sense of being a stable, ongoing self isn't a given. It's a specific pattern of brain activity that can be turned down or even switched off. If your own internal storyteller is already starting to reevaluate things, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. We tackle questions like this every week, and you won't want to miss where we go next as we keep exploring the frontiers of the mind. Section 4. The malleable self. It's not just that the self can be divided or silenced. It can also be easily fooled, which shows just how flimsy our sense of me really is. One of the most famous and frankly creepy demonstrations of this is the rubber hand illusion. You can even try a version of it at home. In the experiment, you sit with your real hand hidden from your own view, and a realistic-looking rubber hand is placed where you can see it. An experimenter then starts stroking both your hidden real hand and the visible rubber hand with paintbrushes in perfect sync. After a minute or two, your brain does something incredible. It starts to adopt the fake hand as its own. You begin to feel the sensation of the brush strokes coming from the rubber hand. The illusion gets so convincing that if the experimenter then suddenly lunges at the rubber hand with a hammer, you'll gasp and pull back, your brain reacting as if your own body is under attack. This simple trick reveals a deep truth. Our brain's map of our own body isn't set in stone. It's a flexible, constantly updated model. Our feeling of ownership over our own limbs is a clever construction. And if something as fundamental as where my body ends and the world begins can be so easily manipulated, how solid can the rest of our self-concept really be? Conclusion: the liberating revelation. Okay, let's put it all together. We've seen split-brain patients whose inner narrator invents stories to create a sense of unity. We have the default mode network, the brain's storyteller, which can be quieted to make the self dissolve. And we have simple illusions that show how easily our brain can be tricked into redrawing the very boundaries of me. So what does it all mean? It points toward a mind-bending conclusion. The self isn't a thing. It's not a static entity or a tiny pilot flying your body. The self is a process. It's a dynamic and ongoing story your brain tells itself to make sense of the world. It's a useful illusion, like a user interface for an impossibly complex biological machine. This illusion probably evolved because it helped us survive, plan for the future, and navigate our complex social lives. So, back to the big question. Is the you you've known your entire life an illusion? Leading theories in neuroscience suggest that the solid, continuous, and independent self we all feel is, in fact, a masterfully crafted story. But that shouldn't be terrifying. In fact, it can be the opposite. It's a revelation that can be incredibly liberating. If the self is a story, then you're not just its passive reader. You have a hand in the writing. The discovery that the self is a construction doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you're more flexible, more dynamic, and more connected to the world than you ever imagined. It's an invitation to stop over-identifying with the noisy storyteller in your head and to start experiencing the world more directly. This isn't a loss of self, it's an opportunity for freedom. Freedom from old, tired narratives, from fixed ideas of who you're supposed to be, and the freedom to write a new, better story for yourself, starting right now. What do you think? Is this idea scary, or is it freeing? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip into the mind, be sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest questions about who we are.